The next type of connective tissue is that of bone, which we can refer to as osseous tissue. And the description of it is that it is hard, calcified matrix, which has many collagen fibers, has mature cells called osteocytes, and they lie in lacunae, and it is vascularized. And vascularized means that it has lots of blood vessels in it. Many people might not think that it's vascularized because bone is very hard, but it has many, many blood vessels, as you'll learn more about when we get to chapter 6. It also has these lacunae, and lacunae is plural for lacuna, and a lacuna is a cavity or it is a small space where an osteocyte resides. Remember, we also were introduced to that word for a chondrocyte. So again, remember that when it ends in cyte, it's a mature cell. When it ends in blast, that means it's an immature cell. So the structure of compact bone specifically is that it has this circular structure, and the circular structure always surrounds something called the central canal, which you can see here where it is labeled. And then there are rings that surround each central canal. Those rings are called lamella, and between the lamellae are these small cavities or spaces with osteocytes in them. So it's pretty easy to recognize because it almost looks like what you would envision if you were to observe the growth rings on a tree. The function of osseous tissue is that it supports and protects, provides levers for muscles, specifically skeletal muscles, to act on, and it stores calcium and other minerals and fat, and also has marrow inside the bone, which is the site of blood cell formation. And the term for that is called hematopoiesis. So, if I were to ask you on the test, which of the following systems is responsible for blood cell formation, you would answer skeletal system. A lot of students make the mistake of saying cardiovascular system because that's where the blood is, but where the blood cells are actually made is from the marrow. The last type of connective tissue is blood. And again, remember, blood is very different from the rest of connective tissue. So it's very unique for this reason. And that's because it has a fluid matrix. Its components are red and white blood cells as well as platelets. The function of those red blood cells or erythrocytes are to transport gases, nutrients, waste, and substances. The gases are on the red blood cells, but the nutrients, waste, and other substances, like, for example, hormones, are transported in the fluid matrix, which is the plasma. We also see white blood cells here and the plasma, which remember is the fluid matrix. And at this point, you're not responsible for the 5 types of white blood cells because you'll be learning about them in A&P2. So the location of blood is contained within blood vessels. And I'd like you to pay attention to the surrounding cells to a blood vessel. So the type of tissue that lines or forms a boundary in places like the blood vessel is epithelium. And since it's only one layer thick, you should know the specific type of epithelium. It is simple, meaning that it's one layer, and it's extremely thin and squashed looking, which makes for squamous. So it's called simple squamous epithelium. The next type of tissue that we're going to learn about is muscle tissue. And there are three types of muscle tissue. There's skeletal muscle, which is long, cylindrical, multinucleate, and has striations. But we can't call it striated muscle because cardiac muscle is also striated. So this is a part of the muscle fiber or the cell. And I'm going to draw a black box surrounding the skeletal muscle cell. So you can see how large it is. So in this case, we can see the striations, which are these lines going in this direction. We also see that there are many nuclei. In this case, there are 5 nuclei for this one muscle fiber or cell. So we can see the striations. It's highly organized, and its function is voluntary movement, locomotion, manipulation of the environment. So think of using your muscles in your hands to be able to pick up a pencil. Facial expressions are skeletal muscle, and again, it's under voluntary control. So that means that your brain or spinal cord has to send a signal to that skeletal muscle to cause it to contract. The location of it is going to be attached to bones or occasionally skin. The next type of muscle is cardiac muscle. And cardiac muscle is branched, striated, and it's usually uninucleate. Sometimes there's 2 nuclei, but it's connected by specialized junctions, which are called intercalated discs. And these intercalated discs are used for communication, and they're made up of 2 structures that you learned about in chapter 3 called the desmosomes and the gap junction. Remember, the gap junction specifically has proteins called connexons that act as tunnels so that calcium can quickly move from one cell to another. A very important role of cardiac muscle. So as it contracts, it propels blood into the circulation and it's involuntarily controlled. So obviously that means that we don't wake up in the morning and decide that we're going to make our heart just start contract. So that means it's under involuntary control. And it's located in the walls of the heart. So if we were to look specifically at this area of the heart, this would be a ventricle, which you'll learn about next semester. And that cardiac muscle is what we call the myocardium. The last type of muscle that we have in our body is called smooth muscle. And smooth muscle cells are spindle shaped. They're tapered on both ends with a centrally located nucleus. So it's almost like they're fatter in the middle and they taper at the sides. This is the only one that's non-striated and it forms sheets. Its function is that it propels substances or objects along internal passageways. So some of those substances could be things like foodstuffs in the GI tract, urine in the urinary system, and the uterus. It's under involuntary control, so it happens automatically. So it's found in the walls of most hollow organs. So some of the places we might find them is the walls of the GI tract, the ureters, which is part of the urinary system, the uterus, and also blood vessels. So there's lining of the blood vessels are epithelium, under that's connective tissue, and then smooth muscle.